Three things. First of all, an expression of gratitude from myself and from my brother, who's currently in transit from overseas, but the way that you have distilled and articulated your information into your teachings over the years has proven very, very life-changing for us. So
thank you.
Gratitude from both of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second was an observation after our session with Kim this afternoon. There was a lady who asked about the connection between the source and the energies of yin and yang. So I just wanted to offer as an observation or a visualization that I had to see if it would be useful to other people, that it struck me when you were talking about the analogy of the sky and the clouds as thought clouds the other day. That's an analogy that I've used with my clients as well. And when Kim was speaking this afternoon, it came to me an image of the source being like outer space of nothingness, just empty space. And then the energies of yin and yang, even though they may not be visible, they're still very real, like light sources or light particles or sound waves moving through space. So for that lady who asked that question, or for anybody else who might find that useful, I hope that that does create an image that can be useful for you. Thirdly, a question for you regarding dealing with unconscious people and whether you yourself, maybe more so earlier in your life, whether you have felt lonely or isolated or frustrated in dealing with unconscious people, and what your approach was to that at different stages of your life.
Right, yes. Thank you. Well, that perhaps is the main challenge for everybody, because it is people mostly to who we get challenged by. Other sources of challenge are, of course, your physical body could present a challenge. There can be financial challenges. But large part of challenges come through humans, because humans are difficult. Many humans are still very much trapped in ego. First part of your question, I was relatively isolated for many years of my life when, after the shift in consciousness, I carried on with my normal life. It had a certain momentum. I was still in the academic world. And then 3-4 years later, I had to go out of that, leave it behind completely. And then many years happened when I was not related to the world, to any of the usual channels. I had no particular job, no relationships, no close relationships. And I spent many days, weeks, months not seeing that many people, and gradually people would come to me for advice. That happened gradually, it slowly grew through word of mouth. And then I had that kind of relationship with humans. But throughout, there's always challenges. Even if you live in relative isolation, you will come into contact with humans that are unconscious. So I think you need to welcome that, because those challenges force you to become more present. You remember I talked about the other day, if you want to make the body stronger, you do exercise, you do physical exercise. And what is physical exercise? It's making life difficult for the body. That's a new way of looking at it, but if you look at it close, you'll see it is true, because the body suddenly has to make an enormous effort you're forcing the body, you're giving the body challenges that were not there before. Lift a heavy weight, run a mile, or whatever it is you're doing. And so then through being challenged beyond its comfort zone, the body gets stronger. And in the case of spiritual growth, we need all those unconscious humans to challenge us. Otherwise, the presence would not intensify and arise. So the first thing we need to do, and I learned that also, to regard these unconscious humans as blessings. So rather than believing you shouldn't be here, making my life difficult, regard the unconscious human as something, a necessary part of being here on this planet at this time. And so you can welcome them when they make life difficult for you. The important thing is, though, that humans, the unconscious humans, do not pull you into unconsciousness yourself. That is the challenge, the biggest challenge. And what I mentioned in the previous session also applies here. When you are being challenged by situations or people, up to a certain point of human development, the moment a situation gets challenging or you meet a challenging person, you become reactive and become more unconscious than you were before you were challenged. So you meet an angry person, you get angry yourself. You meet a confrontational person and you become even more confrontational. You're fighting. Then a certain thing happens, you reach that level where beyond which the challenges make you more conscious. I think most of the people here will have reached the level where you may occasionally be pulled back, yes, but may have reached the level where from now on, when challenges come into your life through situations or people, you become more present rather than be pulled into unconscious reaction. And that's your spiritual practice. That can be your main spiritual practice. So if you realize relationships are your spiritual practice, whether they are short relationships or at work or family relationships, if you can shift the way you look at relationships and then regard relationships as spiritual practice, it's much easier to deal with unconscious humans. And then the challenge is to stay present while they are being unconscious with you. I learned that early on when, after my shift in consciousness, my father's second wife was quite unconscious, and then not only unconscious, she developed a mental illness, but the mental illness was already hidden in the unconsciousness. The mental illness she developed was acute paranoia, and she was in a mental home for a while, then came back home. Whenever I visited them, once or twice, as I mentioned before, I stayed in hotels, but many times I went there, stayed with them, and I realized the moment I saw her, I would become intensely present. I would just go, and then she would start talking to me. Usually the stories would start with talking about her enemies, the people who were waiting down in the street and who would follow her, people she would see in shops. And according to those stories, there must be at least 100 or 200 people whose main occupation is to follow her and make her life difficult. But that was the story, so I had to listen. The moment I arrived, she would tell me the latest events of what happened to all these people who were following her and doing things to sabotage her life, all fictitious. And immediately I went into very intense presence. And by the second day, the stories would subside a little bit. And by the third day, she wouldn't talk that much. And once or twice it happened that I was not acutely present when she was talking, and immediately the old stories would come back up. She would even look at me suspiciously and say, why are you really here? What do you want from me? Well, so I noticed there was my consciousness had an effect on her state of consciousness. So that was particularly noticeable in that case. And she became more sane while I was there. And the moment I left, she went back into a complete unconsciousness. And many times this has happened to me. I describe even one or two instances in New Earth or Power of Now when, for example, my neighbor came to me in the middle of the night, and she said, she also had some paranoia. She said, these are evil people who want to take over my place, and so you must help me. We need to stand together, imaginary enemies. And I felt this shift into intense presence. And after a few minutes she stopped talking. And yes, you may remember reading, she said, when she looked at all her papers, this isn't important at all, is it? And I said, no. And then she left. So, practice with humans, if you know what presence is, and if you can get some sense of what I'm talking about within yourself at this very moment, when I speak of intensification of presence. Intensification of presence will usually involve the entire body, and you will feel the intensification of presence in every cell of your body when it becomes very intense. And that energy field is not just in the body, it's all around. It's almost as if presence were filling the space when it becomes very intense. And it's a beautiful, wonderful state to be in, and it comes when it's needed. You cannot bring it about. It also comes sometimes when one talks about it. It certainly comes in a setting like this, when many people come together with this common endeavor. So the main, it's not weapon, it's the wrong word, but the main tool dealing with unconscious people is the intensification of presence in you, which will result in a lack of reactivity to their unconsciousness, so that you can respond to what they say or do and not react against them. And that is an art form, and that you can only practice that art form of responding to an unconscious human instead of reacting against an unconscious human. You can only practice that art form when you are present, intensely present. There are also degrees of unconsciousness in humans. Some are deeply unconscious. Some have, many humans, you might family members and so on, they temporarily get taken over by waves of unconsciousness. Sometimes when certain situations happen, suddenly that human being gets completely unconscious, and it often involves the pain body, so gets taken over by ego, pain body, and you don't hardly recognize them. This often is a discovery made by people when they start like partners, they love each other. Then the next step is either they get married, or before they get married they move in together. And it's only then usually that when humans live together or work together that you notice that periodically many humans get completely taken over by some area in their life of unconsciousness. And that's a terrible discovery that people make when they start living together or getting married, because after a few weeks you will discover another aspect of your partner that wasn't there before. You didn't know it was there. And you go, oh dear. Did I make a big mistake here? And the same thing might happen the other way around. So, in what areas is it most difficult for you to deal with that? Is it in your family situations or close relationships or at work? Where is the main difficulty?
Predominantly with clients in a healthcare setting. And some family members as well, although I've learnt to deal with them over time.
Yes.
But particularly with clients who require a response from you, and trying to shape that response in a conscious way can sometimes be very difficult.
What work do you do?
Physical therapy, physio.
Physiotherapy.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you give just one example of what you just described with the client? Because it's always easier to understand when one hears a concrete example.
Well, a lot of my day is spent listening to people's stories about their pain.
Yes.
And some of them are very deep-seated beliefs that their pain will never change and that their physical pain comes from a source that can't be altered. And some clients who have mental health issues in relation to their physical problems as well, and who are very attached to their mental health issues and very attached to their diagnoses as part of their identity.
Yes.
And continually seek responses from other people that confirm that identity
exactly
to them.
Yes. Yes. So when you are present, your intuition is also more accessible, so there may be certain things that at times you can say to them, a little hint, or whether you ask them to go into the body and feel the body, so that there's a little bit of disidentification from the mental image of who they are. So the more presence you bring in as your main tool, the easier it will become to deal with those humans, and the more helpful you will be to them. It doesn't mean that everybody will awaken who comes to you, but miracles do happen through presence. I told you before I thought I was a healer for 2 or 3 years, because people said to me I was doing healing. And I became dissatisfied because the people who then started coming to me were only interested in their physical symptoms, and I realized what they really need is a shift in consciousness. So there may be some similarities with what you do.
I think most definitely. And the trouble is that when you're in a consulting room with somebody for half an hour, you can't just go, I've had enough of this, and walk out.
Yes.
Whereas, with other people in, my personal spheres, I can say, okay, it's time for me to go now.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's where I think the biggest challenge
Yes.
lies therein.
Yes. People working with others in that capacity, whether it's physiotherapy or whether it's psychotherapy, at some point something else takes over, and that then becomes, when presence takes over completely as you deal with people, then it will become much easier. Psychotherapists even, who have been trained to apply a particular modality of psychotherapy to their patients, at some point after a few years, some of them kind of gradually forget about the modality, or is no longer primary. In some of them, presence arises spontaneously as they sit with people. And then they become really effective in what they do, and they may no longer even know what it is they do because it's not them that does it. There's a line in A Course in Miracles which may help you because you are a kind of healer. A healer does not heal, he or she lets healing be. So, and then something else takes over. And that's the key to your success with your clients.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will use the challenging people to strengthen my spiritual muscles.
Okay. There's no shortage. The universe is abundant.